You've been training for the planche and front lever wrong, and you don't even know it.
Here's my 5-step method to create the best calisthenics statics program for optimal strength gains. By the end of this video, you'll be able to use this science-backed flowchart to create a program that will supercharge your statics training.
This video is split up into sections focused on the different training parameters for statics, also known as isometrics in calisthenics training. Intensity refers to the effort level and is represented as a percentage of maximal force that can be generated with an isometric or static hold. We'll discuss how to determine what percent intensity your planche or lever holds are and what intensity is optimal for strength training. Hold duration is how long you hold each planche or lever variation. I'll teach you how many second holds are ideal for strength training. We'll discuss what time under tension is required for strength gains. Sets and reps are self-explanatory. I'll show you examples of how to choose your sets and reps based on intensity, time under tension per session, and hold duration. Finally, total time under tension per week, which will represent weekly volume, which is a critical target for sustainable and efficient strength gains.
Step 1 is to determine target intensity. This will determine all other steps in my 5 steps to creating the best science-based calisthenics static program.
Now we need to figure out what percent intensity and therefore which static hold variation is optimal for strength gains. Several studies in Oranchuk 2019 demonstrate that you can improve strength with 60 to 100% of maximum intensity. These studies suggest that moderate intensity can be effective for strength as long as you train at higher volumes or longer total time under tension per session. However, Oranchuk recommends that strength training be performed in the 80 to 100% range if the goal is neural adaptations with minimal fatigue. Lower intensities can elicit similar strength improvements, but fatigue and recovery will become a barrier. The key takeaways are as follows. 80 to 100% intensity stimulates good strength gain through load-based neural adaptations. 60 to 75% intensity stimulates similar strength gains to that of high-intensity training through metabolic fatigue and motor unit cycling.
If we go back to the flowchart, this is why intensity branches to 80 to 100% and 60 to 75%. Which path you choose depends on your goals and training program, but both will lead to similar strength gains. Step 2 is to choose the right exercise. This is super important because if you don't choose the variation that matches the target intensity in step 1, you won't get optimal strength gains. Let's start off with the problem in calisthenics. Currently, you have no way of quantifying how hard an exercise variation is. You can see how long you can hold an exercise, but max hold time does not convert to percent intensity. Without percent intensity of an exercise, you can't figure out steps 3 to 5, since all subsequent steps depend on knowing percent intensity of your selected exercise variation.
Nobody I know of talks about how to determine intensity of calisthenics holds, statics, and isometrics. That's what I'm going to do here. In weightlifting, you'll determine your max intensity by performing a 1RM or multiple RM test, while in calisthenics, you'll test your max by holding the hardest static variation for as long as possible. In weightlifting, you'll use a training load chart to figure out your 100% intensity or 1RM based on a training load chart. In calisthenics, we don't have a way to convert your max hold time to a percent intensity. Or we don't know of a way yet.
Now for the solution. A meta-analysis by Freyla and Avon in 2010 studied the max hold time at different intensities. They created a formula to predict your max hold time based on percent intensity. I reworked this formula so we can use it to determine percent intensity from max static hold time. This table represents the percent intensity you're at from your max hold time. If you can hold an exercise for 57.1 seconds, you're at 50% intensity. If you can hold an exercise for 21.1 seconds, you're at 70% intensity. If your max hold time is 6 seconds, your exercise is 95% intensity. You get the point. Choose the exercise with the calculated percent intensity that is within the 80 to 100% or 60 to 75% ranges for high or moderate intensity training. This is how you choose the correct exercise variation based on the target intensity. Step 3 is to choose the hold duration for each exercise that will maximize strength gains.
Each contraction duration depends on the intensity that you're training at.
Lum and Barbosa recommend a 1 to 5 second contraction duration for 80 to 100% intensity. They recommend 70 to 75% intensity variations be held for 3 to 30 seconds. In my experience, an appropriate hold duration for compound calisthenic static moves in the moderate intensity range should be about 10 to 30 seconds. In the flowchart, if you choose high intensity, your contraction duration is 1 to 5 seconds. If you choose moderate intensity, your contraction duration is 10 to 30 seconds. Step 4 is choosing the appropriate time under tension per session, or the total time you spend holding an exercise per workout session.
Now that we know what intensity to train at, what is the total volume or time under tension per session that we should aim for to improve our strength? A review by Lum and Barbosa in 2019 recommends a time under tension of 30 to 90 seconds when training for strength at 80 to 100% intensity. When training at less than 75% intensity, time under tension should be 50 to 180 seconds.
Step 5 is to figure out your sets and reps. This is a step that will tie the 4 previous steps together.
Now that we know what intensity, time under tension, and individual contraction duration we need to be training at, figuring out sets and reps is fairly simple. For 80 to 100% intensity, the target is 30 to 90 seconds.
Each individual contraction should be 1 to 5 seconds.
Possible set and rep structures could include 6 sets of 1 rep of 5-second holds, or 5 sets of 3 reps of 3-second holds. For 60 to 75% intensity,
the target is 50 to 180 seconds.
Each individual contraction should be 10 to 30 seconds. Possible set and rep structures could include 10 sets of 1 rep of 10-second hold, or 2 sets of 2 reps of a 20-second hold. Choose your target intensity and recommended total time under tension and rep duration. Your sets, reps, and duration should fall within the recommended total time under tension.
Now we know how to work through the 5 steps of this flowchart to determine intensity, exercise variation, contraction duration, time under tension per session, and finally sets and reps. The final part of this flowchart is sessions per week and weekly time under tension. Sessions per week is variable on the person, but I'll discuss what the research recommends.
Most literature explores 3 training sessions per week, based off of the 48-hour recovery window to prevent cumulative central fatigue. This means that when training at 80 to 100% intensity, you should target about 90 to 270 seconds per week spread across 3 training sessions. When training at 60 to 75% intensity,
You should target about 150 to 540 seconds per week.
spread across 3 training sessions.
And there you have it. That's how you use this flowchart to construct a science-based statics program to maximize your strength gains. There are other things to discuss regarding this topic, like workload ratios, periodization, ballistic isometrics, joint angles, and so much more that I'll talk about in future videos. But for now, this is your 5-step blueprint to get stronger.
You should now have a good understanding of how to program for statics in calisthenics training for optimal strength adaptation. Just remember, adaptations take time. Be patient and keep training. The 5-step blueprint and the calisthenics training flowchart are available in the description below for free. And if you're interested in working with me for programming or calisthenics training in general, hit the link in the description below. Let's get to work.